Bibliophiles, and welcome back to Blatantly Bookish. I'm Marissa, and today I'm here with my April reading wrap-up. So April was a pretty good reading month for me in the end. I had a very slow month in the beginning. I read a lot of whimsical books, and then it picked up towards the end, and I ended up finishing one book on May 1st that I'm counting as part of my April reads. So let's get into the books. The first book that I finished in the month of April was my audiobook, commuter book, The 100-Year-Old Man Who Climbed Out the Window and Disappeared by Jonasson, translated by Bradbury. Jonasson is a Swedish author, and this book was a fantastic audiobook to read during my stressful drive to work. I'm pretty sure I've discussed how people drive like maniacs on my commute. They just cut me off without signaling, make crazy U-turns through red lights, suddenly stop in the middle of the right lane with their hazard lights on. But I digress. This book is, as the title suggests, about a 100-year-old man who climbs out the window. After a long and eventful life, Alan Carlson finds himself in a nursing home, which he hates. They're putting together a special 100th birthday celebration for him, but he has no interest. Instead, he decides to take back control of his life, escape out the window of his nursing home, and embark on an adventure replete with suitcases full of cash, unpleasant criminals, and an elephant named Sonia. This sounds like the adventure of a lifetime, but we learn that Alan Carlson has had many such adventures in his life. He's a bit of a pyro, teaching himself about explosions and ammunitions from an early age, and for someone who loathes politics, he has had his hand in some of the most important political events of the 20th century, interacting with political figures such as Churchill, Stalin, Truman, Mao, and more. This book is full of the unexpected and has a light, whimsical way of exposition, but at its core, it has profound messages about death, happiness, and how to live a meaningful life. The tone of narration in this book and the cast of quirky characters both remind me of one of my favorite shows, Pushing Daisies. The premise of the show, much like the premise of this book, sounds absurd, but it's captivating and so well done. I don't really know where I'm going with this, but I guess if you enjoyed the quirky, wonderful show Pushing Daisies, I'd highly recommend that you check out this book. The next books I finished in the month of April were volumes 3 and 4 of the graphic novel series Paper Girls by Brian K. Vaughan, who also writes for the popular Saga series, which I have not actually read. Paper Girls follows a group of 4 12-year-old paper girls in 1988 who end up finding a time machine in the basement of a half-finished house. The town is attacked by a mysterious force from the future, and the girls are thrown headfirst into a time-traveling adventure. That was more the premise of the series as a whole, but volumes 3 and 4 follow where volumes 1 and 2 leave off. I am really enjoying the series so far, but I kind of forgot what happened in volumes 1 and 2, which made it slightly difficult to get back into volumes 3 and 4. They really should just have a recap in the beginning or a previously on kind of thing like they do in TV shows, but anyway, I highly recommend this series if you're up for some sci-fi 80s comic adventures. Now for some of my less whimsical reads of the month, I buddy read Marriage by Susan Edmonstone Ferrier with Claudia from Spinster's Library and Mel from Mel's Bookland Adventures as part of Claudia's 1818 novel project, where she's making the effort to read novels published in 1818 this year in 2018. Susan Edmonstone Ferrier is one of Jane Austen's contemporaries, whose works were popular in their time but are seldom discussed today. She's often called the Scottish Jane Austen. Marriage begins, rather unsurprisingly, with a marriage and explores the themes of why people marry, motherhood, family, and morality. It has beautiful depictions of the Scottish Highlands and features some quirky and lovable, or rather, love-to-hate them kinds of characters, including the main character, Lady Juliana, her daughter Mary, and a whole host of eccentric spinster aunts. I will be discussing this book as well as the comparison between Susan Ferrier and Jane Austen in future videos. So if you're interested in finding more authors from Jane Austen's time period, or if you're interested in some of the themes I just mentioned, you should look for my upcoming video all about marriage and Susan Ferrier. I also read Girls Burn Brighter by Shobha this month. I had very high hopes for this book, as Shobha wrote one of my favorite books of 2017, and that was An Unrestored Woman, which is a series of short stories which I've gushed about plenty on this channel already. I'll link a video where I gush about that somewhere, either up above or down below, we'll see. Girls Burn Brighter is Shobha Rao's debut novel, and I have very, very mixed feelings about it. It's about Purnima and Savitha, two girls in the town of Indravali in India who are drawn to each other and form a close-knit friendship. Savitha teaches Purnima to find beauty and solace in the details of life, in a bolt of indigo cloth, a bowl of yogurt rice and bananas, in the bond of friendship. But when circumstances drive them apart, Purnima leaves the life she knows to find her friend halfway across the world in Seattle. The book alternates between the two girls' perspectives, is written with painstakingly beautiful prose, and addresses difficult topics that face women today, including domestic abuse, human trafficking, immigration, and feminism. Despite this novel's brilliance, I thought it could have been even better. My two main critiques of the book are the ending and the voices of the two main protagonists. The two girls, Savitha and Purnima, felt like they had the same narrative voice to me. Apart from their situations and the fact that each section of the book had one of their names as the header, I wouldn't have been able to distinguish the characters from each other. One could argue that this emphasizes how strong a bond these girls share, that they almost act and sound like the same person. But it's more likely that although Shobha Rao is clearly a massively talented writer, she was unable to give these characters unique voices. The ending to me was another major disappointment. The plot line that we as readers were waiting for the entire book finally happened, and yet Rao only hinted at it. We didn't get to see the action of the ending unfold. This would have been a brilliant ending for a short story. Short stories are a wonderful form in that they feature a snippet of time and leave so much room for speculation on the reader's part as to the events that happened before and after the glimpse of time we're privileged enough to experience in the narrative. But I expect a novel to share a fuller view of a story, to weave multiple plot lines together and multiple characters together to show us the action and then leave us to think about those after effects and ramifications of the story. Shobha Rao's ending for Girls Burn Brighter was too much like a short story ending. It actually reminded me a lot of the ending of Wives and Daughters, which Gaskell died before actually finishing. You know what's going to happen, but you just don't get the satisfaction of watching it unfold. I couldn't believe that Girls Burn Brighter ended when it did, and I read the last paragraph about 5 times before accepting that my book wasn't missing pages or included volume 1 only or something like that. But I think the ending was so disappointing for me because of how captivating the rest of the book was. I know I just spent a really long time critiquing this book and complaining about it, but despite those few flaws I mentioned, I actually highly recommend reading this book. Especially now that you know what to expect from the nature of the ending, so you won't be shocked and surprised and desperately wanting more like I was. So I'm just going to leave you with 2 quotes that really stood with me from this book. What fools we are, we girls, afraid of the wrong things at the wrong times, afraid of a burned face when outside waiting for you are fires you cannot imagine, men holding matches up to your gasoline eyes, flames all around you licking at your just-born breasts, your just-bled body, and infernos as wide as the world, waiting to impoverish you, make you ash, and even the wind, my dear, she thought, watching you burn, willing it, passing over you and through you, scattering you because you are a girl and because you are ash. So that's just an example of some of the really powerful writing. I have one more that's a little more uplifting to end this discussion on Girls Burn Brighter. And so she decided in that moment, decided, astonished that she could even do such a thing as decide, that she would never again ask forgiveness for a thing she didn't do, for crimes she could in no way recall committing. The next book that I finished this month was The Unseen World by Liz Moore. I listened to this one on audiobook while commuting to work, which is really the only time that I listen to audiobooks, and I was shocked that I was able to follow the plot and drive without missing anything. Usually I feel when I listen to an audiobook and am driving that I tune in and out of the text. This book was different though. I felt that I truly absorbed every detail and plot point. The Unseen World is about the relationship between Ada Sibelius and her father, David. David is a brilliant, eccentric, and slightly socially inept single father who runs a computer science laboratory in 1980s Boston. Homeschooled, Ada goes with her father to work at his computer science lab. She interacts mostly with adults and the graduate students there, and David's language processing computer program named Elixir. Ada is content in her sheltered existence, but it soon becomes clear that David is keeping a life-changing secret from Ada that forces her out of her comfortable existence that David has created for the two of them. This book was simply amazing and one that I wouldn't hesitate to hand to anyone. It truly has something for all types of readers. The plot has some twists and is fast-paced enough for those who like thrillers or mysteries, but the characters and relationships are so well developed that it's great for readers who prefer character-based literary fiction as well. It's a perfectly balanced book in a way that contemporary reads rarely are for me, and I could not get enough of it. And last but not least, I read Tipping the Velvet by Sarah Waters this month. I'm cheating a little bit because technically I did finish it on May 1st, but who cares about the semantics? I had a lovely time reading this one with Katie from Books and Things, who you're probably familiar with by now because I mention her in the majority of my videos. Tipping the Velvet is historical fiction set in the Victorian era. It's about Nancy, an oyster girl who grows up shucking oysters in the quiet town of Whitstable, but she's captivated by the music hall act of Kitty Butler, a masher, which is sort of like a male impersonator. Kitty offers Nance the opportunity to go with her to London as her dresser, exposing our main character to the theater as well as her own sexual preferences and the shadowy Victorian lesbian underground. This was a brilliant read. There is nothing as good as a well-written and thoroughly researched piece of historical fiction, and who better to write this book than Sarah Waters, who literally has a PhD in lesbian and gay historical fiction from 1870 until present times. I was amazed at the way this book unfolded. Thankfully, it was devoid of the platitude of plot twists that were simply too much for me in Sarah Waters' Fingersmith. This book's plot is a very classic Victorian Bildungsroman. I loved how Sarah Waters ties in the themes of oysters and show business with Nancy's relationships to create an engaging and gender-bending book. My only criticism of this book is the overuse of the words queer and gay. I get it. I know that queer and gay are words that were frequently used in the Victorian period without connotations of sexual orientation, but I was aggravated by the overuse of these words and their double entendre meaning in this book. However, it didn't bother Katie, so maybe I'm just being too picky at this point. As you've probably realized by now, I would not recommend this book if you are homophobic or if you don't want to read any sex scenes. This book is by nature overtly sexual. I'd pretty much recommend it though to anyone else, especially if you love the Victorian period or historical fiction in general. So that is all I have for you today. I would love to hear in the comments down below if you've heard of any of these books, if you've read any of these books, if you've liked any of these books, basically anything about what I've said in this video down below. And I'm curious to know what your favorite read for the month of April was. And are there any books that you would recommend for me based on the books that I've read this month? As always, I look forward to hearing from you in the comments down below, and I'll see you in another video soon. Bye!